Hey all, it's David Ducker coming back at you, and today I'm going to be talking about terminology. See, when my character steps out onto the field and he's wearing his Corinthian helm and his Lindthorax, he's got his hoplon and his spada in hand, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know that he's a Greek-inspired character, that he's a hoplite, that he's going to fit into that Greco-Roman setting. Just by the terminology, you know that. Whereas if I say, if I take on some RPG terminology, I'm wearing a helmet and a breastplate and a large shield and a short sword, now there could be some confusion. Now you could be talking about a Roman legionnaire, perhaps, a centurion. You could be talking about, a Saxon warrior, and he's got a sea axe and a round shield, and he's got a breastplate on that it could be a coat of plates, and of course the helmet is incredibly ambiguous. It could be any kind of helmet at all, except a coif. I would hope that even people who use generic terminology know a coif is not a helmet. But my point is, I prefer the precision of describing exactly the words for your character's equipment, their gear, making them unique, different, setting appropriate. It gives you flavor, feeling for that setting. It really fleshes it out a lot. It's so much more interesting, it's unique, it's memorable. And those are all the things you want out of a game, and you can get a lot of that, just a tiny dose in all of your equipment. So it's perfect. It's awesome. So that's the number one reason I prefer historical terminology. As a number two reason for preferring the historical terminology is you get to learn about history, about the world. If I'm talking to someone who's an archaeologist, like my man Josh Pullman, or somebody who's a historian, or an antiquarian, or someone who does historical European martial arts, HEMA, if I'm using real-world terminology, we're all on the same page, all of us, no problems. But if I'm using fantasy game supplement terminology, they're going to think I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I love that you can learn about the real world by learning about the fantasy world, and it builds on each other, and your knowledge improves. I think that's a wonderful thing. And, also, there are already all these terms. There's no reason to invent a term like short sword when there are, multiple different names of those kinds of blades. From a Greek-style rapier, which is Bronze Age, of course, the original rapier, to a gladius, to a spada. You could even, lump in a sea axe with that, or maybe even a messer, an earlier messer. So I really, I don't see any point for inventing these terms, and that's just weapons. You can talk about, armor, you talk about horses. The terminology is so, to me, important, just because it should describe with accuracy what you're trying to get across. So in our game, for example, I'm actually learning about horses, real life horses. How tall are horses? What are the different breeds, bloodlines? What are the different types? What's the difference between hot-blooded and warm-blooded and cold-blooded for horses? And it's really interesting, and it adds to the game. So I learn about the real world, and I learn about the game world. It's awesome. I'm doubling up. I got skill synergy. And my players are learning too. So they'll learn about what's a destrier, what's a courser, what's a jenner or palfrey, a roundcy, all these different horse breeds that they had in the Middle Ages. So we get to learn about them, and then by describing them, instead of just having, he's riding a heavy war horse as opposed to a light war horse, if I say, he's riding a courser as opposed to a destrier, the players will know about that now. They'll say, oh, a courser, that's really expensive horse. He's not riding a Roundseat or a Jenner, so he must have wealth. And a courser is really agile and quick, fast, but also flighty. So he must be a really good horseman and really value that mobility. So now they've learned all this about the character just from what kind of horse that he has. Whereas if I just said light warhorse, it wouldn't come across as much. You wouldn't be. It's not as specific, so you can't learn as much from it. It would, by definition. So I love the historical terminology. I love learning about history. I love applying it. I love being precise with my language whenever possible, and I encourage you to do so as well. I'll also mention pet peeve here, and this comes partially from my pal Lindy Beige. Check out his channel. It's just called Lindy Beige, for a whole bunch of videos on historical arms and armor. But he did a video about mail, and this is often conflated. Mail is what most people in gaming circles call chainmail, and that's the in real terminology, that's the only kind of mail there is. That is what mail is. It is chainmail. The term chainmail is really only used for like RPGs. Mail is the name of the armor, and other forms of armor are not mail. So if you say plate mail, that's not a thing. That doesn't exist in the real world. That's a gaming construct. You say scale mail, that again is not a thing. That's not a word. That's not it doesn't mean anything. There's plate armor, there's scale armor, there's mail. Like those are real world armors. And in gaming circles you say, oh, plate mail, scale mail, chain mail, but none of that is actually historically correct. This is a big pet peeve of mine. But I have a lot of pet peeves about people using inappropriate weapons and armor. Like if you bust in a great sword in a game that's set in the 12th century, I'll be mad at you. It doesn't make sense. If you're Mike described his character wearing a bassinet, and our game is set in like the 1300s, so it doesn't make sense. You shouldn't. That hasn't been invented yet. Nobody has a bassinet in this setting, except you, because you're an idiot. Because you didn't describe your character well. You don't research your character. You don't know what you're talking about. And now I know that you don't know what you're talking about. But you don't know that I know that you don't know what you're talking about. So pet peeve of mine. The other main time it comes in is with swords. Of course, there's the arming sword, and then there's the long sword, and then there's the, you can say a great sword. Those are historical terms, and unfortunately, long sword is what fantasy gamers call an arming sword. So there's a lot of confusion there, and bastard sword is what fantasy gamers call a long sword. Great swords pretty much line up, which is good. But fantasy gamers have switched the terminology on two of them, and then they just mess things up horribly. Now, a lot of these terms did exist at times. Like I said, longsword is a kind of sword. It's just not the kind of sword that they seem to think it is. And same thing with bastard sword. Bastard sword and longsword, that's the same thing. Again, Lindy Beige has another video just on that, on swords, long swords, arming swords, bastard swords. Call them what you will, know them as you like, or at least that's his opinion. See, he's not a stickler for terminology, and he does the historical stuff and the RPGs, and he doesn't really care what you call it. I only do RPGs, and I do care what you call it. So, again, it's a lot of pet peeves in there, the gaming bugbears, as John Large would say. But I just wanted to throw out those points about, how great it is to learn about real history, and how precision in language is so important, and how these different words and different terms can add to your game. Your world can be more detailed and fleshed out because of that. If you have a tulwar instead of a shamshir, instead of a scimitar, instead of a falchion, they all are slightly different, but also you get so much flavor just out of different verbiage for them. So I'm going to sign out there. Let me know what you think about terminology in gaming. If you've seen it done especially good, especially poorly, and riddle me this: what is a morning star to you? That's probably the most ambiguous term of them all. It can refer to any number of weapons. But I'm going to sign out right there. Everybody have a good day in YouTube land.